Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode of Leading People is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. Leading People is a podcast which features insightful conversations with leading people about leading people. Yes, that's a play on words. In each episode, you get tips from leading people such as CEOs, HR professionals, authors, and thought leaders on all aspects of leading people, including how to attract, engage, develop, and grow talent to build successful organizations. And we provide insights on how to lead yourself so you can consistently perform at your best. For this week's episode, I sat down with author, coach, NLP trainer, and fellow Harrison Assessments managing partner, Pat Hutchinson, to chat about personal development, leadership, and much more, including how important it is that training provides tangible skills that you can apply immediately afterwards. Pat Hutchinson, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jerry. I'm delighted to be here.
So it's great to have you as a guest. We know each other quite some time now. But for our listeners who don't maybe know you, shame on them that they haven't bought all your books. But for the listeners out there who may be hearing about you for the first time, maybe you could just take us through a little bit about how did you get here? Was there sort of a person, place, or an event, or a thing, or that epiphany moment that got you to where you are today? Or maybe there was a series of them. Perhaps we could start exploring that, and then we'll get into the books and what you've learned and what you want to share with our listeners.
Okay, Jerry, it's a really interesting question, that, because I think I've been through my life doing everything on the basis of intuition, which you may find quite disturbing. Some other people might find disturbing. But when I look back and I think about how my career developed and how I got to where I am now, it started a long time ago. I was a teacher. I was a teacher in further education, and I taught business studies to young people just coming out of school. And I was offered this role by my own teacher, having done my own business studies course when I first left college. And she said to me, "Why don't you come and teach in the college?" So I thought, well, sounds cool, I will. And I did it for several years. And I was never really happy about the fact that most of what I was teaching was obviously from books, because I had very little experience at that time. And I was teaching business studies from the point of view of theory, if you like. And having done it for a few years, I took the opportunity to change course, if you like, when I got married and we moved away from the area. And we moved north, and I took up a role in a big retail chain. And I was responsible for the merchandising alongside the buyer for a multi-million-pound department. And I learned a lot. I worked for that company, and then I worked for another company in a similar role. And then I was made redundant after about, 5-6 years of doing this. And I thought, well, I've actually got some experience now. And I looked back at my career and thought, well, I've enjoyed the teaching part of it. If anybody needed some help with something, I was always the sort of first one there to help and guide. And I enjoyed that part of it. And but I didn't particularly want to go back into further education. So whilst I was sort of thinking about what to do next, I realised that I had a lot of clothes. So I opened a dress shop, would you believe, to sell off all my old clothes, and knowing full well that this wasn't going to be doing that forever. And I also joined another company that sold jewellery, and I was doing these side by side, but knowing it wasn't, the fulfilling thing I wanted to do. And eventually I decided that I needed to go back to college. I needed to capitalise on this idea that I enjoyed teaching people. And I went back to Brookes University, as it became, and did a leadership course. It was funded by the European Union at the time. And I completed the course, but I still had this feeling that it was all theory. I kept going, this is theory, this is theory. I need to be doing some practical stuff. And so this was my opportunity then to start to combine what I'd learnt in business and what I'd learnt at college. And I met a chap called Dave Malden, who eventually became my business partner. And he said to me, if I want to start up in business and learn to teach people leadership, I needed to learn something called NLP. And I said, what's NLP? I'm going back 20 odd years now, of course. And he explained roughly what it was. And I thought, okay, here we go again, back to school. I went back to college and I did my practitioner course, my master practitioner course. And then I carried on to become trainer trained in NLP. And then Dave and I became business partners. And for me, it was the most massive light bulb moment, because here I now had a tool that I could help other people to make the changes that they needed to make.
Mm-hmm.
All my leadership training, and they've been holding up icons of leadership, and I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, Jerry, but when you sit in a classroom and you look at somebody out there who's just climbed the 7 peaks or just rode across the channel or something, and you're sitting thinking, it's marvellous, but I couldn't do that. What NLP gave me was the opportunity to help people with those everyday little challenges that would take the blinkers off, if you like.
Yeah.
The other thing it gave me was this idea that we're all different. Have you ever met your double? Jerry, you ever met anybody who's like you?
I do have a funny story.
Like...
I do have a funny story about, well, I'll save it for another time.
Okay.
But I haven't met my double. No, I haven't met my double.
No, you haven't met your double. No. And so I come from a school of thought that just simply thinks, if everybody's different, who's to say at the end of the day who's right or wrong about anything?
Yeah.
We're all different. We've all got a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that, again, is what NLP gave me. It gave me the ability to recognise that everybody's an individual. They've all got little things that are getting in their way of success, and I could help them with that.
Yeah.
And that gave me a great sense of satisfaction.
Yeah.
So Dave and I then set up a company called Quadrant One International, which I still have. And we set up a whole list of a suite of courses with the word real in front.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're now moving away from the theoretical background that I had into the realism of what learning and leadership is all about. And we set up real sales, we did real success, real personal effectiveness, real people management. Everything had a real in front of it, just to remind us that this wasn't about us. It wasn't about the theory. It was about those people in the room learning to take away the barriers that they had to their own success.
Yeah. And of course, for those who don't actually know, NLP doesn't stand for natural language processing, which is something that has emerged in artificial intelligence this last few years. It stands for neuro linguistic programming. And you and I share that a similar journey, actually. And a lot of leadership, and I have an MBA from a very well established, renowned business school. A lot of leadership is about what, and maybe idolizing who did certain things. What NLP tends to do is put the how behind it, connect to the why and the what, and give people tools that they can actually seriously use and see the results day to day. And they're not generalized. Like you say, they're really, it's all about the unique individual that's standing beside you or in front of you. And there's so many tools out there in culture studies, etc., highly generalized. Now, some of that's great, except that you cannot generalize all Italians or all people from Finland or Sweden or America or wherever, because it just doesn't work. They're unique people, so great. And so this is sort of the journey.
Sorry, there was just one other thing I was going to say there. I've got a very soft spot for our William Shakespeare. I live about 40 minutes from from where he was born. And he had a wonderful expression that just simply went, there's no such thing as good or bad, only thinking makes it so. And I think that is just so relevant to NLP, is the way we think that creates a pattern that then generates our behavior.
Yeah.
And if that behavior is successful and gets us results and it's ethical, then great. If not, let's do something about it. And it very often just requires a little tweaking.
That's right. And we live in, particularly these last few years, we seem to be living in a world that has become very black and white. So thinking does make it so, in the sense Shakespeare might even turn in his grave when he realizes that thinking is making it so. And NLP teaches us to really the opposite of that, which is to allow whatever is to be and to work with that on all sorts of different levels. And you mentioned Dave Molden, and you've actually co-authored some books with Dave, and I know you've authored your own books, and things like how to be more successful, how to be more confident, how to sell more. What have you learned from writing these books and the feedback and seminars or coaching you've done as a result of all of that? You wrote a great book called Brilliant NLP at one stage, and I used to recommend it to people who wanted to understand, get into NLP. I'd say this book will get you started because it's a nice, compact synopsis. Then you wrote the workbook that goes with it that makes it even more practical, because then people can go out and find out how it all works in the real world. So tell us, unpack that, and perhaps highlight some of the learnings and what you'd like to share with our listeners particularly in terms of leadership and leading people and creating followers, for example. In the next part of our conversation, Pat explains from her own experience how writing a book can make you even better at what you do.
The book writing was an incredible experience, actually, and I can only really sort of categorize it as a learning experience. Writing a book gives you the opportunity to research, to learn, to develop, to pull on examples, pull on experiences. And by pulling all that together, it really makes you think about what you want and where you're going. And one of the things, Brilliant NLP to me was a starting point, in that it made NLP for me simple. I wanted it to be simple because I think the world we live in is far too complex. And I'm sure, Jerry, you've read lots of NLP experts and their books, and they can be awfully complicated. And I wanted them to be real. I wanted them to be simple because, as I say, we live in a very complex world. Life, I think, is incredibly complex, and simplicity is the essence. I think this when I'm working with HR specialists in the field of leadership, and I just want to say to them, keep it simple. Stop making stuff so complicated that people won't remember it. And the other thing that the books gave us, of course, was an opportunity to say, look, if you're going to learn this stuff, read the book, use it as almost as a manual, if you like. We didn't produce manuals for those particular courses. We did for practitioner courses, but for the Real Success, the Real series, we didn't produce manuals because it was all in the book. And people are more likely to read a book than they are to read a manual. A manual, I don't know how many manuals you've got on your shelf, Jerry, but I've got hundreds, and they all sit there and gather dust. Whereas books don't. Books get read. Yeah. So from that perspective, for me, it was about making it real and keeping it simple.
Yeah.
And I'll add another one as well. As far as training goes, we spend far too much time at work. We need to make it enjoyable. And for me, training is much more effective when people are having fun and learning.
Yeah.
So 3 things there.
And actually, for all the trainers out there, or people who hire trainers, just taking your points, one of my fellow countrymen, a very famous playwright, he did the whole teaching and training profession a big disservice many years ago when he said, those who can do and those who can't teach. And he couldn't be That's George Bernard Shaw. He could not be further from the truth in many, many contexts. Because when you're confronted with, how am I going to explain all this stuff that I've spent hours, maybe days, years learning to a group of people in a matter of a couple of hours or a couple of minutes? How am I going to distill this in a way that they will understand it and also deal with all the questions they will ask me as a result of that? That actually requires, you have to dig very deep. You have to look at things from many different perspectives. And even then, when you deliver that stuff, you're still learning because people do ask you questions. And that frame of I'm there to learn as well as a trainer, I'm sure you've had this, I'm here to learn as well, is creates an incredible atmosphere in a room, because it means that everybody's on a journey, albeit maybe we come in from different levels of expertise. And there are times when you genuinely go, wow, that person or that interaction between two people taught me so much about this stuff. Yeah. So I'd just like to highlight that, like that, for listeners out there, particularly those who are training, but even those who buy training in or, commission training, that there's a lot of deep, valuable work that people who train do to be able to get that stuff into the room and into other people's heads and then into their muscles so they can do this and develop the skills that they need to develop as a result of the training.
And what you've just said as well is a great lesson for leaders generally. Let's learn from the people that we're working with. Too often we see leaders that think they should know everything and should have the answer to everything, and no, they don't. If I had one big message for leaders all over the place, would be go and talk to people that are actually doing the work at the customer-facing level, because they're the people that are going to be able to give you the feedback that's going to help you generate more ideas, more creativity in the organisation. But whilst we still see this sort of structural thing going on, and leaders very rarely speaking to the people that are doing the work, it's not going to happen. And unfortunately, we tend to promote leaders on the basis that they are confident and they look as though they're pretty certain about what they're doing, and are therefore likely to generate inverted commas followers. But I don't buy into that. I think leaders should be down there listening to what the people that are doing the work are actually saying.
And you echo sentiments that previous guests on the show have articulated very well around, leaders being often very detached, a lot of messaging getting filtered that goes up and down, being surprised at what's really happening in their organizations, and not really getting into the shoes of people and understanding that. I think one of my guests, Sheila Parry, made the point that a person's week is full of about 100 different events, and those 100 different events are part of why that person comes to work. And it's not some big platitude written on a wall or some big values or mission statement. It's actually what that person is doing day in, day out, and what they're trying to achieve and accomplish. And being able to acknowledge that and see it and hear it and sense it and feel it is something that leaders could probably do a little bit more of.
Absolutely, yeah. Was it Maya? I'm not a great one on quotes, but I've got three that I particularly like. Was it Maya Angelou that said, people won't remember what you said and did, but they will remember how you made them feel? Yeah. And I think that's what leaders need to remember a lot of. How are you making your team feel? Because years later, they will still be reporting you as a lousy manager or a lousy leader if you did something that made them feel bad. Yeah.
So one of the things that NLP, let's just keep NLP as a thread running through this, because it will reflect a lot of what you've learned, what you've done. And one of the things that it helps people, whether they're leaders or not, is develop this self-awareness of themselves. And out of that then springs the ability to be aware of other people. This concept that emotional intelligence is not just something you can slap on. If you haven't got self-awareness, it's really not going to work if you're going to try and become emotionally intelligent. And I think one of the things you mentioned to me in the past was that, people get in their own way, right? And sometimes as a coach, so let's talk about the work you're doing with leaders. There's this concept of helping those people. Talk to me about that. Talk to our listeners about that.
In terms of helping people to be successful, whether it's as a leader or in work in the business place generally, for me, it's about identifying the very little bit that's getting in the way. I can regale you with examples ad infinitum of people who have been great presenters, and then something's happened, and for some reason they're never going to present ever again because they suddenly got this concept in their head that they're lousy. Mm-hmm. And you can take it right back to a specific experience, and if you can reframe that, help them to reframe that experience using NLP techniques. And I've got a classic example of this happening to a girl. She was presenting. She was getting great results, and then suddenly she wouldn't do it anymore. And she came on my course. We identified the reason why she had stopped presenting, and we were able to reframe it for her, and off she went again. And we did it very quickly because we could identify the actual incident where it happened, and off she went. I've had a couple of examples of where people have actually taken time off sick because they think they're doing something wrong. Largely it's around feedback. If they're not getting the feedback, and they put all sorts of meanings on that they're not good, they're no good, they can't please the boss, they can't please the team or whatever, and they make themselves ill worrying about it. I've had that a couple of times. And then you point out to them that actually, if other people don't need feedback, then they are very unlikely to give it out themselves. And when they do, it sounds awfully artificial, sounds very, very unreal. And then they go, oh yeah, and off they go and start performing again. But these things can really get to people, and these are the things that get under people's skins and help to change their thinking in a negative way. And NLP allows you to put it back in place and say, well, hang on a minute, you don't need to be thinking like this. You do have a choice. You can think differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's giving people that sense that there's more than one way of seeing the world. Removing the black and whiteness often and showing that there are more colors to things than they might have noticed. And I guess if we take this black and white thing that we referred to earlier on, you and I both spent some time recently in the last few years exploring the concept of paradoxes, which sort of, let's say, provide a way of looking at what might appear to be black and white either or situations, and allow people to understand those as sometimes things that need to be held, let's say, in complement to each other and actually managed and dealt with because they kind of interact and need each other in a more systemic way. And we have been working with tools in the coaching space around this. Perhaps we could explore a little bit how that has been unfolding for you, because I know you do a lot of coaching debriefs using these tools. What have you learned and noticed about how leaders receive those? What difference it makes to their leadership and their lives, even based on this ability to remove these obstacles that sometimes get in their way? So perhaps you could unpack some of that for our listeners.
It's probably worth just giving you a little bit of history as to how, because you're referring to the Harrison assessment, which I use a lot in my coaching. It's probably worth just noting how I came into this, because Harrison fits really nicely with everything that I believe in. Back in 2006, I'm going back a long way, we came across this. Dave and I just looked at it and thought, well, crikey, it's another assessment, and we thought, well, we'd try it because we were recommended it by somebody who we had a lot of respect for. And we had a quiet moment in the office. We both filled it in. And we sat there and we looked at each other. We swapped each other's questionnaires, results, paradox graphs. And we just looked at each other and went, that's you. And he said, that's you. And you do that.
Right.
And we thought, well, hang on, this needs a bit more research. We can't just take it on the basis of a power of two here. And we had a long discussion about why it was so powerful in relation to other assessments. And the first thing that obviously popped out was the fact that it wasn't based on personality. Personality is great, but doesn't necessarily tell you whether you're going to be any good at a job or whatever. So the first thing, it wasn't based on personality. The second thing, it allowed for that individuality. I said to you earlier that you don't have a double. It allowed for that individuality. And we found that really, really useful in using it in courses. We used it on our courses to identify areas that people wanted to develop. And the third thing about it was this thing that Jim Collins calls the power of the and. It's not about either or. You're not either diplomatic or frank. It's about pulling those two together. And if you've got both diplomacy and frankness, then you have amazing flexibility in the communication arena. If you have neither, then you probably avoid communication altogether.
Yeah.
And I've never come across an assessment that actually delivers on both of those to give you that and not or perspective. It also allows you, because of the way that the paradox graphs are set out, it allows you to give a complete overview of someone's approach to work, starting off with the fact that they've got to have an opinion. Without an opinion, you're not going anywhere. You can't make a decision. You can't put a strategy together. I work a lot with engineers, and engineers tend to be very risk averse. Thank heavens. Please don't take risks with engineering. That would be totally and utterly ridiculous. Yeah. But once they move from the day job into the leadership role, then they have to start to think about strategic thinking, putting strategies together. And by definition, strategy involves risk.
Yep.
So they have to move from this normal concept, or this normal nature, if you like, of being risk averse, into being able to switch to say, well, actually, we've got a strategy here. It's never been tried, but we've got to have a go. We've done all the analysing pitfalls we can, but we need to get it off the ground. And Harrison again gave us that realism, fun, if you like, because it's fun to find out where you're coming from. It's practical, really, really practical, and it recognises that individuality, which I think is so important.
Yeah, it doesn't put
so if you've got
doesn't put people in boxes or make judgments about them.
Pictures.
I remember when I finished my managerial psychology training, I kind of went away thinking this could be very dangerous in the wrong hands because of some of the psychology and the extrapolation of things that were going on from a couple of data points, huge extrapolations about people's personalities and everything about them, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, was just being extrapolated and overgeneralized. Whereas what the Harrison assessment has done for people is it helps them see the granularity of things, so that even areas where they can see where they're strong, but where they're not maybe as strong. It's not about you're not a good communicator. It's about actually you're pretty good on many things. It's just if there's just one little thing if you could work on and tweak, that is so enabling for people. I've had so many people say to me when they've looked at these results, they go, "Oh wow, that's just captures me. It explains to me why I'm good at what I'm doing and why I'm good at things and get results." And it also highlights some of those struggles I have on a day-to-day basis. And now I know what to do. Because often when you ask people if they've taken a personality test or whatever it's called, and they show you the results, and then you say, "That's great. So you're here and maybe your colleague is over there. Now what?" And they go, "Now what?" And I say, "Well, what are you going to do? What can you do?" They say, but that's the way it is." And then you're back to, but wouldn't it be better to have a tool which gives you a starting point that then starts the journey of exploration and development that will take you somewhere that you want to go, because you're the one who's in complete control of it all as the person who's been through this assessment process. And with a really talented and skilled coach to help you, you can really go somewhere with this.
Yeah. And I love the one where we get down to the end of it, to the one that we call power. And you find someone who's overly helpful, but isn't actually, runs around the world helping everybody out, but doesn't necessarily put their own needs forward. And I always get to that point, and I'll just say the guy's name's Joe. I say, how many people are out there, Joe, saying it's all right, Joe will do it? And they go, oh my crikey, yeah, you're right. And I always say to them, don't stop doing that. It's a wonderful trait to have, to be helpful. It's lovely. But it could well be getting in the way of you doing your own job. And is that happening? And they have this massive sort of realization that, yes, they're so busy helping everybody else, they're not actually they can't go back to the top and start the strategy because they're too busy down here doing the helpful bit.
Yeah, those aha moments. Every coach out there wants their clients to have those aha moments. And the surge of energy that kicks in after them, where the client really says, okay, I want to do something about this. And as you say, it's not about being less helpful in this situation. It's just being mindful of how that impacts your ability to do your job and how you're perceived perhaps by other people, because that's the other thing the paradoxes help with, is it's the me that others see, that people see in those paradoxes, and they go, oh my God.
Yeah.
But all is not lost, because help is on the way.
Exactly.
So tell me.
I do a lot of work with, sorry, I was just about to say, I do a lot of work with engineers, as I say, and some of the things that this particular organisation does is they have leadership programs, and that, when people are about to start the leadership program, in fact, I'm in the middle of doing 60 of them at the moment, they have a session with me. I don't run the program, but they have a session with me doing their Harrison assessment. And what that allows me to do is to identify, or for them to do, not me, is to identify specific areas on which they can actually work during the program, because leadership programs can be very theoretical, as I said earlier. And what this does is it gives them an opportunity. So, for example, if they are overly helpful and they need to learn to be a little bit more not pushy, but assertive in getting their own needs across, I just get them to look for opportunities on the program where they can do that safely.
Yeah.
Or if they do need to be more diplomatic, look for opportunities where you can be diplomatic, hold back, or opposite, or the opposite. If you need to be more frank, tell it as it is. Let's learn to do this, but do it in the safety of this program that you're going on. Yeah.
If you're a coach or trainer who'd like to help your clients develop better self-awareness, then you might want to check out the Paradox Coaching Academy at paradoxcoaching.co. That's paradoxcoaching.co. If you're in HR and would like to explore how the Harrison Talent Analytics and Solutions could help you with all aspects of your talent management needs, then check out the Wide Circle website at widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. Now, back to our conversation, where Pat expands upon how to develop your self-awareness, improve how you engage with your teams, and be more effective in general. She provides examples of the work she has done with clients and finishes with her top 3 tips for leaders. I think one of the things that perhaps you can talk a little bit about is how working with leadership level creates a leverage for an organization, because if you can get the leaders to embrace their self-awareness, to embrace new ways of working and take that back into their workplace, they can have a knock-on impact on so many people. Isn't that right?
Absolutely spot on, yeah. And it's about this openness, isn't it? About this openness, this sharing, and be brave enough to be wrong occasionally. Even as a leader, you've got to be wrong occasionally, and not to close people down if they're wrong, or if they've made a mistake. Or the openness and trust is just so imperative in any organisation. I've been working with another company who have several service desks. It's an IT department of a very, very large organisation, and they have several service desks. And the culture is changing. They're trying to change the culture to be more open, and we've been using the engagement expectations reports to do that. And what it's allowed them to do is for each team leader to have individual conversations with their team on their expectations. Now, they may or may not be able to fill them, but the subliminal message that's going through that is this company cares, this team leader cares, this man or this girl actually cares about my progress and whether I'm happy in my role. And it's those subliminal messages that are just as important as the real messages that are going out by doing the assessment in the first place.
Yeah, and of course, all that's supported by lots of research. I mean, in the famous Gallup 12, there is one of the expectations is that somebody cares about me as an individual or a person at work, right? So it's not like you're making this stuff up. It's real stuff. The research has been done on this, and yet a lot of this gets lost in these generalized employee opinion surveys and things like that. And I'm also doing similar work to you, and I've noticed almost a sense of relief that finally people can talk about what they expect from work, and managers can finally understand what might have kicked in on somebody's to demotivate somebody, or that their performance has gone down. Often it's a very simple thing that needs to be addressed. It's not usually massive. Even this concept of wants development, sometimes it's a simple thing. It's not being sent to INSEAD or Harvard. It's like, please allow me to do this on my own.
Go away, let me get on with it.
Let me do this on my own instead of supervising me all the time. It can be as simple as that.
This is going back to that reality thing that I was talking about earlier. It's all very well holding leaders up as people that achieve magnificent, amazing things, but actually it's the everyday things that people want to resolve. It's not usually something huge, as you quite rightly say.
Okay, so where I was going is your top, maybe leave us with a couple of 2 or 3 tips for busy leaders out there. What could you leave them with to help them move forward? We live in quite a challenging times this last year or so, with the COVID, with having to learn new ways to work with ourselves, to work with other people. What would be some things you would say to people out there listening that they could begin to do tomorrow? Let's get down to realism and practicalities now. What are some of the things that they could just start doing tomorrow that will make a difference?
Okay, so for me, it's about listening. I think that's the biggest skill any leader can have, to listen to what their people have got to say and take it on board. The second one is I have this concept of sheep dipping. Large organizations tend to have a program for leaders to run through. And I can remember several years ago now being asked to run a program for leaders. And it transpired as we were talking about this, that this was just an expectation from the management. And we said, can I just ask you something? Do your people want to do this? And they said, well, don't know. This is just the next step in their career. And we actually walked away from the job because we said, sorry, we can't do that. We are very much into making sure that people are in roles that they want to be in, because that's the way you're going to get results. By keeping people, you're going to reduce your staff turnover. You're going to get more creativity. You're going to get a lot more out of people if you make sure they're doing jobs they enjoy doing, which of course is where Harrison comes in again. So sheep dipping is an absolute no-no right. in my book. And keep it simple. I cannot overemphasize this enough. We live in a very complex world, and anything we can do that keeps it simple and on track, people will remember and be able to do and replicate. People have to see themselves doing it. Whatever it is that you're trying to develop them into, they have to see themselves doing it. And they do that by keeping it simple.
Yep. And
I'm a simple soul, Jerry.
That's great to know. And actually, one of my former colleagues, when I worked at DHL, who then became CEO of the sort of flagship star part of the business, the express business, Ken Allen, wrote a book 2 years ago called Radical Simplicity. And not only is it something philosophical and aspirational, he managed to turn around a business phenomenally by applying this principle to how he ran the business. And it transformed that business from massive losses to huge profitability, and became the real jewel in the crown of the Deutsche Post organization. So
Yeah.
It works. It's not just you and me talking about it, but simplicity works.
It works.
We saw it with Steve Jobs. Look at the design simplicity of all the products he created at Apple. They just intuitively, they work. They're just nice to have, nice to hold in your hands, and they do what what it says on the tin and beyond. So there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate things that don't need to be complicated. Right. Pat, how do people get in touch with you now that they've heard your dulcet tones? What's the best way to get in touch with you? I'll put some links in the show notes as usual.
Well, email address, would that do? pat@quadrant1.com.
Okay.
And I'm always on social media, and I also have a website called www.quadrant1.com.
Okay. And on that note, thank you very, very much for taking time out to share your insights and wisdom, both with me and all our listeners out there. And I'd like to wish you continued success in everything you do.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You will find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.